Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here with us today. We're going to begin this morning with the invocation, and the Reverend Alice R. Walker Johnson of Clinton African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church of Rockville is going to give us the invocation, and please stand if you are able. Reverend.
Thank you. Let us pray. And I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and an angel came and took me up on a mountain high. And I looked, and I saw men and women, boys and girls. They were black and white and red and yellow and brown, and they were holding hands and singing praises to our God. I asked the angel, who are they? The angel said, those are the children of the Most High God. I asked the angel, well, where are they? I wanted to be there. And the angel said, they're already over in heaven. I knew it was a vision, and I said to the angel, well, when will all of this fully be true? The angel said, when all of God's children truly learn to love one another. And so it is. We are not yet the beloved community that God is calling, but God, we desire to be that. So would you now send your precious Holy Spirit into this place? Would you even now give power to these, not as we know power, but power, God, that is grounded in our purpose for building stronger community? Would you give us a sense of partnership? Would you give us a sense of purpose? Would you give us a sense when we disagree on issues, a matter of peace? Would you even right now unite this council, that as they speak, it is as one, as they work, it is as one, as they share, it is as one, as they lead, it is as one, that all who enter into this chamber might know that you are supreme in the lives of those who gather, that your community here in Montgomery County is indeed beloved, that we are yet working to make heaven our home. It's in your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Every Tuesday should start out with that same spirit. Thank you very much. We're going to move for the moment the presentation, and Councilmember Rice is on his way, so we're going to go to general business. And Madam Clerk, do you have any announcements or petitions?
Yes, President Katz. There's one announcement. The council is seeking applicants for the representative of the Board of Trustees for employee retirement plans and the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefits Trust. The deadline has been extended to January 29th, 2020 at 5 p.m. We also have an addendum item under general business, an announcement that on January 28th at 1:45 p.m., the council will hold a briefing on Vision Zero focused on pedestrian and bicycle safety.
Thank you very much. And we're going to go to our consent calendar, but when Councilmember Rice is here, so I guess we're not going to our consent calendar. The next item that we have is a presentation, and it's about human trafficking, and Council Vice President Hucker and Rice will please do the honors. And if the county executive could please join us.
Joined by the county executive as well. And why don't the members of the Human Trafficking Awareness Committee join us? We're so lucky to have all your energy and service as well. Okay. Human trafficking is a major tragic problem all over the world, with anywhere from 20 to 40 million people held in sex and labor slavery today. And it's big business. Human trafficking generates over $150 billion a year for the traffickers. Sadly, our county is no exception to this global scourge. But with help from many of our community partners, we've made great progress in raising awareness and fighting this disgrace in our county. Since joining the council in 2014, Councilmember Rice and I and the whole council have worked with our community nonprofits, our police, our state attorney's office, our hospitals, our council staff, and all of our colleagues to combat human trafficking. Legislatively, we've made it easier to punish sex buyers. We've made a financial commitment directing more police and other resources to fight human trafficking. And we've established the Montgomery County Human Trafficking Prevention Committee, which has done great work in many ways. First of all, by comprehensively monitoring the problem, by working with our partners to educate the public and the business community about how to detect the signs of human trafficking and how to act on them, by working with organizations such as Adventist Healthcare, Shady Grove Medical Center, and Fair Girls to provide crucial help to those exploited by human trafficking, helping these survivors get their lives back on track, and by working collaboratively with other jurisdictions to fight what is clearly a regional problem. That's why it's an honor for me this morning to present to our great Prevention Committee a council proclamation recognizing January as National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Hucker, and I apologize for being late this morning, but let me just say that this is incredibly important, and the reason why I traveled a little bit faster than I should have, Mr. County Executive. So.
Uh-oh. Don't tell the sheriff.
Exactly. But let me just say how important this is, because when you hear the stories, all you have to do is talk to one victim. And I think that a lot of times we glamorize in the media as to what happens when it comes to a person who's actually being trafficked. Imagine being forced to work every single day, and we fight for a minimum wage here in Montgomery County that we consider to be just the baseline of what it would be to be able to live here. But the reality is that many of these individuals don't even get that. Many of them are forced to do things that they don't want to do. Many of them are forced on drugs and other kinds of things to force them into this life of which they had no choice in their own volition. Their passports are held, their IDs are held, their families are threatened, their lives are threatened, they're abused and beaten. And this is happening right here in our county. I want you to pause and just think about that for a moment, because as we fight for equality, as we fight for social justice, as we fight for equity, the reality is that we have so many people that continue to be marginalized in the shadows. And the great thing is that we have this Human Trafficking Prevention Committee who's shining a light on this ugly truth that is not just here in Montgomery County, but is rampant throughout the nation. I really want to thank some of our media partners who have continued to highlight this issue and to really bring this to the forefront. And I really want to thank all of our partners for continuing to do the great work when it comes to stamping out this scourge that we see. Whether it's through our police, whether it's through our Department of Health and Human Services, our Department of Permitting Services, all working together, along with all of our nonprofit partners who provide support and resources for these victims, to make sure that we're making a difference and we're saying, no, we don't want human trafficking and slavery here in Montgomery County and in this region. So I really want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Hucker, and I know that County Executive Elrich, who when he was on the council supported all of our initiatives and who now continues to do so as County Executive. So I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Pretty much all the important stuff has been said, as my friend Sidney likes to say. I just want to add that, look, we're going to put a full court press on this. Our goal is to make it impossible to do this business in Montgomery County, and that's something we can do between all of our nonprofit partners, between the police, the sheriff's office, Health and Human Services. We have the resources, we have the ability to put an end to this, and we are going to put an end to this. This is an unacceptable way for people to make a living, and it's an unacceptable way for people to profit. And our job is to make sure you cannot profit from here. We will prosecute people to the full extent of the law, and we do cooperate with all the other state and federal agencies on this, and I mean all other state and federal agencies. This is one issue for which there are no boundaries between Montgomery County and cooperating with anybody who's willing to join us in the fight to stop this, and I guarantee you we're going to continue this. I was proud to be on the council when we passed this legislation. Everything the council's done to continue to support it. Nothing will change except we will continue this battle until we win. Thank you.
read the proclamation, and we'll have the members of the committee introduce themselves and accept the proclamation. Does that work for everybody? So, whereas human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery that is a serious criminal problem in Montgomery County, where traffickers use violence, threats, deception, and other manipulative tactics to force and coerce women and men to engage in commercial sex acts or to provide labor or services against their will. And
Whereas in 2019, Montgomery County Police reported 29 cases of human trafficking with 92 individuals charged, including 88 for prostitution offenses, 3 for human trafficking, and $443,000 seized. And
Whereas the Montgomery County Human Trafficking Prevention Committee, Montgomery County Police Department, and Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office have all worked diligently to curb human trafficking and provide critical support for its survivors. And
whereas January is National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, which formally recognizes that human trafficking consistently occurs in the United States and emphasizes the need for the public and private sectors to come together to focus on prevention, prosecution, partnerships, and support for survivors. Now therefore be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County and the County Executive as well hereby recognizes January as National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, presented on the 21st day of January in the year 2020. Congratulations and thanks to all of you.
Good. This is what happens when you're a little bit short or vertically challenged. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're very proud to be here this morning. My name is Haiti Alvarez. I'm the chair of the Human Trafficking Prevention Committee, and I represent the SAFE Center at the University of Maryland SAFE Center.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Erin Andrews. I am the Executive Director of Fair Girls and the Vice Chair of the Human Trafficking Prevention Committee here in Montgomery County.
We thank you for being here this morning. Our committee works very diligently on behalf of survivors here in Montgomery County to ensure that they receive the services and support that they need and to prevent further acts of human trafficking here in the county. And right now I'll take the opportunity to allow other members of the community to introduce themselves. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Captain Robin Lewis with Sheriff's Office over at the Family Justice Center.
Hi, I'm Patty McClay. I'm the Commissioner with Montgomery County Commission for Women.
Good morning. I'm Donna Rojas, First Vice President with the Commission for Women.
Good morning. Jody Finkelstein, Executive Director.
Cara Grant, representing Montgomery County Public Schools.
Hi, I'm Caroline Ackerman from the Amara Legal Center.
Hi, Janice Freeman, Human Rights Commissioner with the Human Rights Commission.
I just want to say thank you to all of my team here and also all our partners. Over the last year, we were able to accomplish some good things for the committee. We partnered with law enforcement here in Montgomery County for sting operations to make sure that survivors that were recovered during those sting operations were provided access to resources and services that they desperately need to not only stay free, but to remain that way. And we were also able to educate some of our youth here in Montgomery County Schools, although certainly over the coming year we would like to be able to do that more, on the dangers and the red flags and the indicators of human trafficking that can happen right here in their own communities. So thank you so much for this opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Should we stand? Why don't we stand? Nancy, she can't see you. Wow. Okay. I was going to say, what were you standing on?
With the stool.
Yeah,
But I still have, yeah, I don't want to do that.
I was wondering, what in the world did she just stand
I'm
on?
still not even, like.
Somebody on staff that pulled that out.
Okay, that's fine.
How are you? Good to see you. Very good. We're going to continue with our meeting. The next item is the consent calendar, and we need a motion to approve. It's been moved by Councilmember Navarro. We need a second. It's been seconded by Councilmember Reamer. I see no lights on. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed, same sign, and that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item that we have is the introduction of bills. It's Bill 2-20, bicycles, registration amendments. Lead sponsors are Councilmembers Hucker, Jawando, Glass, and Reamer, and a co-sponsor is Councilmember Katz. I see Councilmember Navarro, please.
I would like to be added as a co-sponsor, please.
Councilmember Glass. All right, well, go ahead if you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say that many of us have.
Do you want to speak? Do you want to speak? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I just want to say that many of us have heard complaints from constituents about some undue hardships about trying to ride their bicycles, quite frankly. And I appreciate the collaborative effort among Council Members Hucker, Jawando, Reamer, to correct an outdated law that basically requires people to register their bicycles. One of the functions I think that we serve is not only trying to update and modernize some of our codes and regulations, making sure that all of our residents are safe and sound in our community, but also taking some time to look at codes that were enacted decades ago to make sure that they're still functional. In this case, it was not functional. And so I look forward to this conversation to allow people to ride their bicycles.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando, please.
Thank you, Council President, and also want to echo my thanks to my colleagues, Councilmember Hucker and Reamer and Glass, for their work on this. Laws are meant to protect the public and to keep us safe and serve the public interest. And unfortunately, as we know, after just going through a year-long process on racial equity and social justice, laws for a long time have served the opposite purpose for many communities, to exclude and to make life more difficult. So I think it's our job to be looking at our laws with a critical eye. And this is one of them that was brought up by one of our great state delegates on social media, and several of us said this makes no sense, and we've seen the story of some of our residents who have dealt with this. And so eliminating this burden and making the registration of bicycles voluntary. I certainly never registered my bicycle as a young man, riding all around the county, and thankfully didn't have that issue. I would assume that some of my colleagues will probably share that story. I know Tom is waving his finger at me. But this is really also seriously an example of over-policing. I mean, we have laws on the books, in my opinion, that give wide and broad authority in some instances and are used on certain communities more than others. And so I think whether you're talking about the bicyclists or past fights we've had on loitering, for example, which in laws of that nature, I think this is a great thing, and I'm glad we're taking this step, and it's consistent with our work on social justice and racial equity and with Vision Zero. So I want to thank my colleagues and look forward to moving this forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, thanks for introducing this bill. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor and think this falls under the category of, wait, we have a law that does that. And so I'm glad we're going to fix that, clean it up, and have something that more reflects what people think is already happening and what reflects common sense.
Thank you. Councilmember Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not going to begin by admitting to any civil violations on camera.
Yeah.
I think
On this
pretty
one
sure my
anyhow.
bike was registered. Yes.
This one instance. Yeah,
But I
yeah.
very much want to thank all the sponsors of this bill, Councilmember Reamer and Katz and Glass and Giwando, and Council members Navarro and Friedson for joining us. And thanks to Steve Silverman is here and the other advocates in this community and Delegate Moon who brought this issue to our attention. As Councilmember Giwando said, this repeals an onerous law that requires people who own bikes to register them. It's certainly a law that most people, I think, were unaware of, and it doesn't eliminate, the bill is drafted, doesn't eliminate the program altogether. However, it makes registration voluntary for bicycle owners who wish to be able to use the program to access their bike in the event that it becomes lost or stolen without removing the policy altogether. It also retains the policy for commercial bikes and for our bike share programs at the sensible urging of Mr. Drummer. In addition, the current law dictates, oddly, that the revenues from the fines collected from unregistered bikes go to the police retirement fund, which creates a strange incentive for officers to issue tickets. So Bill 220 removes that incentive and removes any incentive to stop and detain a cyclist. The legislation is in keeping with our two big priorities, racial equity and social justice, and encouraging people to bike as part of our efforts to address climate change and roadway congestion. So it's common sense legislation. I look forward to the discussion in committee, but I'm grateful to all the advocates for getting us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
I'd like to be listed as a co-sponsor. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
I'd also like to be listed as a co-sponsor. Again, no-nonsense legislation. I can't believe that something like this exists.
My guess is this one's going to pay us. That's what I'm going to just guess that. Next is Bill 320, Boards, Committees, and Commissions, Compensation, Reimbursement, and Stipends. Lead sponsor is Councilmember Rice. Councilmember Rice, please.
Well, thank you very much, Council President. And let me just say that on the heels of talking about social justice and racial equity, this certainly is one in which we had the conversation about that particular committee and wanting to have compensation for the committee. And I do believe that it is time for us to take a look at our policy when it comes to all of our boards, committees, and commissions, and some of the folks who serve on that, on these committees and commissions, who take time out of their day to be able to do this and really can't afford to. I was at our last Board of Social Services meeting, and one of our community members was calling in and was saying she couldn't be there because one of her children needed to be cared for and wasn't able to leave to be able to attend the meeting, but wanted to still call in. And it really, it struck me in terms of that, you know, we did have this conversation about this particular committee that we're forming, but there are plenty of existing committees out there who are actually have folks on who would benefit from being able to do this. And there are a lot of people who would like to join these boards, committees, and commissions and can't do so because they don't feel as though they would be able to either miss a shift of work or whatever the case may be to be able to attend one of the meetings. And so I think it's a great discussion point for us, again, how the bill is drafted. And I really want to thank Ms. Wellens for her great work in making it voluntary in terms of asking for, so this wouldn't be something that's automatically given to everyone, because, again, for folks who serve on a lot of these boards and commissions, they can do so and wouldn't ask for reimbursement. But certainly this is one in which it's drafted in a very creative way in such that a person would either have to choose between being reimbursed for mileage and other kinds of things or actually accepting the stipend. And so from that perspective, I think it really is a great conversation for us to have about, again, spreading our equity and justice to our boards, committees, and commissions. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. I do want to go back for the moment to an action item, the approval of the minutes for December 2nd, 3rd, 9th, and 10th, 2019. Is there any corrections? If not, they're going to be approved as written. They are approved as written. Thank you very much. Next is the calls of bill for final reading. This is going to be, I'm going to ask the the sponsor of the bill to please explain that, and then we're going to go to the chair, and then this is going to be deferred. Please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is still under discussion, and I appreciate all the feedback we received from advocates and from many of my colleagues. We're benefiting from their counsel, and with that, I wanted to move to recommend to move it back to committee for purposes of an amendment.
It's been moved. It was moved.
Unless the chair wants to make
Yeah,
a motion.
we're going to let the chair speak, but I just wanted to make the statement that it was moved by Councilmember Hucker and seconded by Councilmember Jawanda to go back to committee. And we're going to ask, before you vote on that, we're going to ask the committee chair to please speak.
Thank you. I'm certainly willing to take it back to committee. I wasn't sure if we were going to do that or if we were just going to bring it back to full council. But I'm happy to take it back to committee.
Defer it for a week and then.
That was my original thought, but we don't have to direct ourselves in specifically, I think, at the moment. I think the point is we need to take another look, and we will come back as soon as we can.
Agreed. Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay? And you're agreeing with that? I do agree. Yeah, Councilmember Jawanda was the one who seconded. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. We had several sessions on, I think 3 sessions on this legislation. It's important legislation that would establish a requirement that does not exist today, which is a requirement for air conditioning. I really appreciate Councilmember Hucker's bringing this forward. Through the legislative process, we had received specific recommendations from the executive branch that I think the committee relied upon to make its recommendations to the full council. Among those was really one of the more difficult issues that we grappled with, which is that we heard from a number of tenants that they would not want to be subject to a requirement because they felt that they didn't need AC, that they preferred not to use it for affordability reasons. We heard from a number of people with that point of view, and the executive branch had recommended that there be an opt-out allowance. And they recommended a number of specific safeguards intended to prevent abuse of that opt-out allowance. This morning, after 7 months of consideration, I think, of this legislation, about an hour ago, we received a letter from the executive branch reversing its position and now opposing the opt-out allowance that we carefully crafted based on their recommendation. So now we need to give some council members a chance to absorb this and consider the implications, and then come back. And I think next week, if we can have it at the council, that's great. The council president will schedule it as the schedule allows. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you, Council President. And we did have a robust discussion in committee. I brought up this very point in committee that if we're having a health and safety bill for air conditioning, as we have a requirement for heat, considering our climate change and the pressures and the cases we've had in the county, that we should not exempt thousands of people that live in single-family homes and rent in that situation, nor should we put our most low-income residents at risk by giving them the false choice of being able to opt out of a provision to save a couple $100, which everyone is going to choose. Having been a low-income tenant myself, they're going to choose that if they're forced to. And we certainly don't want to create that coercion. So I'm glad that the executive, I will also share my frustration with DHCA. On this point, I do agree. I asked several times for clarification of the point. Where is your position, and to explain the rationale? And I do not think this is a good way to move forward, receiving a letter the day before, even though it's in agreement, the day of, even though it's in agreement with my position. I wish we would have had this in committee. I had to go down 2-1. But I'm glad we're going to reconsider it. I'm glad with the outcome, and I just hope that going forward we can consider these things more carefully and get better positions from the executive branch.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. I share the views on the process. I think we had a deliberative process for about 7 months in committee, and the idea that we had the active participation of the executive branch in those discussions were an active part of it, and to have the county executive contradict his own executive branch, minutes before, less than an hour before we go into council session for final approval of a bill is not the way to do public policy. And I am extremely frustrated by that process. I don't think we're doing the public a service by the way that this legislative process was handled. I think we did our job on this end of the street. I'm disappointed that there is not coordination and communication on the other side of the street to provide us with feedback on what the position is of the executive branch. And I don't think that we can move forward responsibly on all legislation if this is going to be the way that the process is handled. And so I think that we really need to figure out a way to make sure that this doesn't happen, because getting a memo that contradicts 7 months of a deliberative process moments before a committee meeting and having that completely upend the legislative process isn't an accountable or transparent process at all. Reasonable minds can disagree on the individual tenets of the bill. I tend to side with empowering individuals to make their own decisions, but I respect the viewpoint, and I think we had a robust discussion about that. I think there's perfectly reasonable views on this. I think there's widespread agreement on the need for the legislation more broadly, and I think what this unfortunately does is taint the process of an otherwise universally supported piece of legislation to provide support for residents who are vulnerable and to make sure that we have healthy housing environment for everybody in Montgomery County. And I think that regardless of how individuals feel on small aspects of the broader bill, that does the entire process a disservice, and I think it harms the public's faith in our ability to do our jobs.
Thank you. It was moved and seconded. All those in favor, please do so by raising your hand. Opposed? This motion carries. Thank you. The next item that we have is Bill 4019, the Inspector General Staff Amendments, and we're going to need a motion for that. Can we have a motion for Bill 4019? It's been moved by Councilmember Navarro. Do we have a second? It was seconded by Councilmember Rice. There are no lights on. It's a roll call vote. Oh, you do. We do have a light on. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, so as the committee chair, I just wanted to,
Didn't say that.
for the listening audience, that this bill, the background is that our Inspector General, who was appointed to complete the remainder of the 4-year term of the recently retired Inspector General Ed Blansett, Ms. Lamarcy. Soon after the appointment, the council expanded the duties of the office and authorized Ms. Lamarcy to fill additional positions. Recruitment of staff members for a short term is likely to reduce the number of well-qualified applicants. An entire staff of term merit employees also runs the risk of leaving a newly appointed IG with little or no staff upon appointment. This bill will retain the term merit status of one or more deputies hired by the IG while making the other positions full career merit positions. The bill contains a transition clause that would require the existing term merit employees to complete their term and permit them to apply for a newly created full merit position after the current term ends. OMB concluded that the bill would have no fiscal impact on the county's budget and finance. Concluded that the bill would not affect the county's economy. Lead sponsors is basically the GO committee, which are Council Members Navarro, Council President Katz, and Council Member Friedson. It was introduced December 3rd, and we did have a public hearing on January 14th in which Inspector General Lamarcy testified supporting the bill as an important change to help her recruit staff and also, and of course, implement the responsibilities added to the office by Bill 11-19. And also we heard from Ms. McKenna, who supported the bill to help hire new staff members to oversee the Montgomery County Public Schools if the state authorizes the expansion of the IG jurisdiction. So what we are doing is basically following up on the previous bill that the GO committee worked on to expand the duties of the Office of the Inspector General. We recognize that as the county continues to grow in complexity, also government operations continue to become more and more complex as we respond to the needs of our constituents, that the Inspector General Office plays a very important role, but it must be brought up to standards in terms of capacity. And we did also look at other jurisdictions and how they had positioned their offices of the Inspector General, and this is a step forward in bringing everything up to standards as well here. So I do want to thank my colleagues, especially Councilmember Friedson, who has been working on these issues, first when he was at the state, but now he's brought that excitement over to Montgomery County Council, and Council President Katz also for his support, and of course Ms. Lamarzi for identifying this is one way to move forward with our goals. So that is the report.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson, it's an opportunity for you, please.
Sure. I just, the committee chair did such a good job of explaining what we were doing, and so I really appreciate that. I will only express my appreciation as well to our new Inspector General for her help, and to Councilmember Navarro and Council President Katz for their leadership on these issues. I think what we did last year in strengthening our oversight function as a legislative branch will be long-term one of the most important things that we did. It probably didn't get as much attention as things like this often don't, but I think this council's effort to exert itself and to demonstrate its commitment to ensuring that every taxpayer dollar is invested efficiently, effectively, appropriately, and responsibly is really at the heart of the type of responsible government that we expect in Montgomery County. And I think this is, as the council, the former council president, the committee chair mentioned, is really continuing on that effort, which I hope is, and I believe will be, a consistent commitment that this council makes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and I understand that's a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Glass.
Did you vote on the motion? Did I miss that?
Well, it's a roll call vote. I mean,
No,
so-
you need to vote on the motion to.
It's been
approve
moved
it.
and seconded. All those in favor, signify by raising your hand. Okay, the motion's been approved, but anyhow, it's a roll call vote.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando? Yes. Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer? Yes. Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro? Yes. Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson? Yes. Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes. So that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item that we have is District Council session, and we're going to have an introduction for zoning text amendment 20-01, solar collection system, the AR zone standards. Lead sponsors are Council Members Reamer and Hucker, and Councilmember Reamer wants to explain.
Thank you, Council President Katz. I want to thank Councilmember Hucker, Chair of our Transportation Environment Committee, for co-leading this important zoning change with me. Montgomery County has declared a climate emergency, which is intended to set the tone for the level of urgency that we bring to this discussion. We have declared that we will get to zero carbon emissions, 100% elimination of our carbon emissions by 2035, and we will reduce our carbon emissions by 80% by 2027. That is a major task, and it will require major changes. It will require changes that go beyond anything we've contemplated previously, and it will require people from every walk of life, from every part of the county to think differently and to get outside of their comfort zone in order to reduce impact on emissions. One of the most effective and most rapid changes that we can make is to substitute fossil fuel for clean, renewable energy. Most of the energy that we generate, about 90% of the emissions that we generate as residents of this county, comes from the buildings that we live in or work in and the cars that we drive. And the way to reduce the emissions that come from the buildings that we live and work in, over the long term, a big impact will come from retrofitting those buildings, changing building codes so as they're renovated, their efficiency improves, making efficiency upgrades. But in the short term, the way that we can really transform the climate impact of our buildings is by changing the sources of energy that they use to run on, to substitute coal-fired energy with clean, renewable energy. I want to thank Councilmember Rice for joining as co-sponsor on this zoning change. It's important. And so that is the fundamental task. How do we get rid of coal in our electricity grid. In order to get rid of coal, we need to substitute it for other sources, solar, wind, particularly. In walk the solar providers, the companies that want to provide solar to our community. An important segment of this market is called community solar. Community solar is allowed by state law. It was set up in state law a few years ago. And it allows companies to go out and find groups of consumers that want to band together and subscribe to a smaller scale solar farm, a community solar project. These are typically less than 12 acres of land because they're limited by the amount of power that they can generate. There's a cap on the amount of the power that they can generate. So the community solar providing companies are saying to us, we are not able to move fast in Montgomery County. We can't build projects in Montgomery County. There's not enough land available. And going rooftop by rooftop is extremely inefficient, slow, tedious, a lot of barriers, a lot of cost, not financially viable at this point in any significant way. So if we want to allow community solar companies to help us substitute coal-fired energy for solar, we need to open the door to community solar. And that means allowing solar on farmland. Now that is a big concern because the Ag Reserve is one of the most consequential policy decisions we've ever made as a county in terms of land use. It has preserved a way of life, which is the rural agricultural way of life in this county. And we have an obligation to handle that right, to be judicious about that. At the same time, I think we're all aware that we're trying to preserve the way of life that we all have on this planet. And that everybody has to grab an oar. And so the proposal that we have today seeks a targeted approach that is just focused on community solar, that would limit the amount of land that could be used to 1,800 acres, which is about 2% of the Ag Reserve. And we think that that would be sufficient for the foreseeable short to mid-term to allow companies to deploy these projects. The implications or the benefit of doing this is substantial. This would power more than 50,000 homes in this county. Now, compare that to rooftop installations. A typical rooftop installation does not fully support the energy use of a home. It can be as little as half. So this is the equivalent, potentially, of, let's just say, a lot more than 50,000 rooftops worth of solar. And we have calculated it would actually reduce the emissions of the county by more than 4% overall, which is a lot. It doesn't sound like, boy, an initiative as big as this, and yet it's only a 4%. It's going to be really hard to get down to 80% reduction, 0% reduction, 0% emissions. So 4% is a lot. Just as another picture of the alternative, the installation that we all see on the roof of this building, I think we're all probably proud that this county has solar installations there, only supports the use of about 3 single-family houses. So this measure would, by contrast, and that required years of effort, by the way, years of effort to get our office building retrofitted with solar, and a complicated arrangement with the private sector to pay for the retrofit of the building and to save money to claim the savings. So 3.1 homes from this council office building's installation, more than 50,000 homes from this effort. So we are working closely with environmental advocates, with farmers to move forward on this, and I look forward to the legislative process, really to get everyone to focus. But again, I think this is a very, very significant step that we can take It will result in very rapid action, I hope, to substitute coal-fired energy with clean, renewable energy and reduce our climate impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Council President, and thank you very much, Chair Reamer and Chair Hucker, for your leadership and support of this bill. As a district council member who represents over a third of our agricultural reserve, this is a huge priority, and it's one in which, when I was at our Maryland Association of Counties summer conference, I was talking with solar industry leaders who are talking about the new technology that is out there that actually allows crops to grow directly below these solar panels. So those who are concerned that this solar installation would somehow impede the ability for our farmers to continue to do the great work of agricultural preservation is now not an issue. It's really one in which it's very exciting. And in fact, even when it comes to what they're looking to do to maintain those areas below, even if they're not going to be farming and they're using it more as a rotation for giving a resting period for that soil, they're talking about using goats to be able to mow the grass, if you will, that's underneath these solar insulation panels. Talk about utilizing nature's gift to be able to make sure that we're partnering with technology. These are the things that are out there, and the only way that we're going to be able to meet our goals, these very aggressive goals that we have, are going to be to do innovative things like this. And so I really just want to thank you. I'm very happy to be a co-sponsor of this. I think it's great, and as the only council member who lives in our agricultural reserve now, it's a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think everything's been well said by Councilmember Reimers and Rice, so I appreciate your leadership on this. I'm happy to help to put this forward because I sponsored the countywide ZTA 2 years ago that took county action to allow community solar in Montgomery County. And just as a little bit of background, the community solar law that passed in Annapolis to allow community solar statewide took about 4 years to pass. I sponsored it one of those years before, while I was still serving there, and it was a major project, but it never could take hold in Montgomery County because of impediments that existed in our zoning code. So the ZTA I sponsored 2 years ago removed those and allowed community solar to be built in Montgomery County up to the limit allowed under state law of 2 megawatts. At the time, we left out the AR zone for a couple of reasons. One is we knew that would be a little more controversial and complicated, and we wanted to put the right precautions in place. And at the time, none of the proposed projects were proposed in the AR zone. Other projects, community solar projects, are now moving forward in Montgomery County outside the Ag Reserve. But as Councilmember Reamer said, we will never reach our climate goals unless we can expand community solar in this direction. So I'm glad to be helping put this bill forward. I think it's a very important step in the right direction, and I look forward to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Please note that we're going to go in recess, but at 12:15, I look forward to having my colleagues join me for a brown bag lunch with the Montgomery County Faith Community Advisory Council on the 6th floor. Thank you very much. We are on recess.
And the right for voting all across America took place there. Bloody Sunday, 1965. And so we look at that and again, the importance of children in that movement as well. And then let's bring it to today, right? Children standing up for the dream. March for Our Lives, DC 2018, where we had thousands of young people taking to the streets and defending their own rights.